Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're looking at a surprisingly common, yet honestly incredibly dangerous blind spot in web development: secure file uploads. You know, most tutorials out there focus entirely on the happy path. You accept a file, store it, return a URL, and everyone goes home happy. But building just for that happy path, it's literally like leaving your front door wide open just because you assume only your friends are going to walk through it. Today, we're exposing exactly why standard file uploads are terrifyingly vulnerable, and more importantly, how we can build an absolute fortress around them.
Okay, I love to map things out clearly, so here's our roadmap for tracking a file from its potentially dangerous arrival all the way to secure storage. The file upload illusion, never trust client input, the 7-step defense, the hidden SVG threat, safe naming and storage, and finally, the final takeaway. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The file upload illusion, and when form inputs become actual attack vectors.
I really want you to burn this quote into your mind. A file upload is the moment you hand control to an untrusted user. Actually, think about the rest of your app for a second. Form inputs, query parameters, JSON payloads, they're all just text, right? You can sanitize them, clean them up, and safely tuck them away in a database. But a file? That's a totally different beast. That is arbitrary binary data from an unverified source that you're about to write directly to your file system. The attack surface area here is completely different, and the consequences of messing this up are absolutely catastrophic.
Moving right along to Section 2, never trust client input, and the fatal flaw of browser claims.
Now this right here is where most systems get totally compromised. We have to highlight why relying on client-side input creates critical security vulnerabilities, because it's the core of the whole issue. Relying on what the client claims a file is literally like asking a burglar if they're a burglar. Imagine an attacker takes a malicious PHP script, like a web shell, and simply renames it to image.jpg. Your server asks the browser, "Hey, what is this?" And the browser dutifully replies, "Oh, it's an image/JPEG." But here's the fatal flaw. The user controls the browser. If your server blindly trusts those client-provided MIME types or extensions without verifying the actual file itself, it accepts the web shell, and boom, your entire application is owned.
So, since we obviously can't trust the client, let's jump into Section 3, the 7-step defense. Let's strip away those client assumptions entirely. To survive this, we really need to adopt the philosophy of defense in depth. A determined attacker, they're not just going to knock on the front door. They're going to pick at every single window and lock they can find. There is no silver bullet here. By layering multiple completely independent checks, we systematically remove the easy paths at every single level, so we aren't relying on just one point of failure.
So here it is, the definitive 7-step pipeline an uploaded file absolutely must survive. We've got file name sanitization, extension allow lists, client MIME checks, actual server MIME detection, cross-checking, size limits, and finally, magic bytes verification. I know, it looks kind of intimidating, but let's break down the most critical checkpoints in this gauntlet.
We start off with check 1, which is validating the name itself. You might be thinking, well, extensions are handled later, but file names are honestly their own sneaky little attack surface. By aggressively sanitizing the name right off the bat, we block path traversals and nasty tricks like double extensions. Think about it. A file named shell.php.jpg can easily sneak past a lazy check that only looks at the text after the very last dot. Proper sanitization shuts that nonsense down immediately.
Let's skip ahead a bit to check 4, because this is where the magic really happens. This is where we finally stop trusting the browser's claims. We use tools on the server side, like Finfo, to read the actual bytes, essentially the DNA of the file straight from the file system. If a PHP script is wearing a JPG name tag, the server does not care. It reads the bytes, sees the raw code, and immediately flags it.
And then there's check 5. This is the ultimate trap for attackers, the cross-check. This is where we take the allowed extension, say a CSV, and we cross-check it against the actual MIME types detected by the server. A legitimate CSV file might map to text/CSV or a text/plain depending on the system. But if a file claims to have a JPG extension, yet our server detects PHP bytes inside, that blatant inconsistency triggers an immediate, catastrophic failure for the upload. No entry.
Check 7 is our absolute final safety net: magic bytes. These are the opening 2 to 8 bytes of a file that act as an undeniable, hard-coded signature for its structural format. We verify these directly to stop what are called polyglot attacks. That's when an attacker brilliantly crafts a file to be valid in multiple formats simultaneously, just to confuse your server. Checking the magic bytes stops the illusion cold.
All right, Section 4, the hidden SVG threat, the Trojan horse of file formats. So
It's a really important question to ask ourselves. Why would an SVG, a seemingly harmless vector image format that we use for logos and icons literally everywhere, why would that be a significant threat? Like, what makes it so much more dangerous than a standard PNG or JPEG?
Well, the answer is actually kind of terrifying. SVGs are built on XML, and a valid, perfectly well-formed SVG can easily harbor embedded JavaScript inside hidden script tags. If you accept an SVG and then serve it inline to another user, you've just created a stored cross-site scripting vector. That means the attacker can steal session cookies or completely hijack accounts. The absolute safest approach here? If you do not have a strict business need for them, ban SVGs completely from your allow list. Literally, one line of code eliminates the risk entirely.
Even a perfectly validated file still can't be trusted completely. Which brings us to Section 5, safe naming and storage. The final destination. Let's talk about naming. You absolutely must strictly separate your concerns here. First, you have the display name. That's the original file name you showed to the user in the UI. Then, you have the actual storage path on the back end. You should never, ever use a user-provided string for your actual file system path, period. Instead, generate a cryptographically unique name for the back-end storage. The UI and the file system should have absolutely zero relationship. And where you actually put that uniquely named file, that's just as critical. Never store uploads directly in your public web folder. A file in the public folder is directly reachable via HTTP. If an executable somehow bypasses your gauntlet, the attacker just guesses the URL and runs it. It's basically like leaving the vault key under the welcome mat. Always store uploads in a private directory outside the web root and serve them strictly through an authorized, authenticated controller. Let's wrap up this explainer by connecting all this back to your broader architecture in Section 6, the final takeaway: rethinking application trust. I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. Protecting file uploads and building a fortress around them is really just the beginning of a true defense-in-depth mindset. We've just proven how blindly trusting a browser's claims can literally compromise an entire server. So I challenge you to look at your code base today. If every single piece of client input is a potential attack vector, what else in your application are you blindly trusting? Thanks for watching this explainer. Stay paranoid and stay secure.